So the greatest TED performance that was in the entire history of TEDx, or TED in general, was supposed to happen right here, TEDxMarionCorrectional, back in April of 2013. This was going to be a flatland freestyle BMX stunt show, flashing lights, all choreographed to tell a story. I was the guy who was going to give that performance. If you don't know what flatland freestyle is, I guess you could say you got a BMX bike, and I guess you could best describe it as a cross between ballet and gymnastics, but on a bicycle. It's pretty cool. I've had the idea to give this performance to blend storytelling with the BMX for a long time, but I didn't really think I'd have a chance to tell it until at least I got out of prison, and even then I thought it would be a really small scale that I'd be able to tell it on. Until I attended the first TEDxMarionCorrectional, 2012. I didn't know what TED was, but some of my friends were involved in that event, and I went there just more to support my friends. I had no idea what TED was. But as I sat there, I seen that it was a good platform to be able to get ideas out and to get your stories out. And that following week, I started watching other TED videos, TED Talks, and one of the first things I discovered was not all TED Talks are talks. There was dancers, there was a puppet show, there was a guy even drying his hands with a paper towel. So I was like, wow, this could be the way I could get this story out. A few weeks after that, they put up application for auditions for the upcoming TED. It would have been the 2013 event. So I filled out the application, I sent it in, and I got called down for an interview, and I told him what I wanted to do. I described the performance for him. And he said, you know what, this is probably something we would like to have as part of our event. Now, to this day, I'm not really convinced that they really wanted to see the performance as much as they wanted to just see a little chubby guy trying to do tricks on a bike. But it didn't really matter to me because I was going to get a chance to tell a story that I've had for this long. And they said, what would you need to be able to do this? And I said, well, I need a BMX bike, and I haven't been on a bike for 16 years, so I need some time to practice. And they said, okay, well, a little bit of red tape to cut through to get a bike into prison. So what can you do to start preparing for the performance before? So they have these little bikes, and it's called a trick flick. It's exactly like a real bike. Everything on that thing works just like a real bike. Little pedals turn, little chain, even everything just like a real bike. You can buy that exact model. So I said if I had one of these things, I'd be able to choreograph the story, learn what transitions I need from trick to trick, sync it up to the music. And then when the real bike came in, all I'd have to do is just make everything smooth, clean some blood off my ankles every day, and it would be okay. And he said, all right, we'll work on getting you this little bike. Well, time started going by, and there was no progress being made on getting this real bike in, and there was no progress even being made on the little bike. So practice time starts slipping away, and every day that you lose practice on a performance like this, it goes down a little bit. So if you have the greatest TED performance here and the worst injury in TED here, every day you miss practice, those two move a little closer together. Well, I was hoping to give the greatest TED performance in history and not the guy that had the worst injury in TED history. So when it got to that point, when those two got close enough, we just called the performance, and it was it. So it was pretty disappointing, but as I mentioned, some of those guys were familiar with my BMX history that were on that committee. So I want to talk about that a little bit. When I was just 2 months shy of my 4th birthday, myself, my older brother, my older sister, we were waiting for her dad to come home. And it was his payday, so we knew it was going to be late. He didn't come home. He had stopped to catch his check, and he was murdered. Left myself, my older brother, my older sister without her dad, my mom without her husband. It's a devastating thing. Still, you can see it's affecting me now. But this murderer was caught, and it was a rather lengthy trial. And at the end of that trial, my mom decided to move us from where we were living, and she moved us into the city. Well, as little kids do, my older brother set off exploring on a funny-looking bike, not like that, but the ones with the big fenders and the things that they had in the 70s. And one of the things he discovered was a BMX racetrack. And he came home, and he's trying to convince my mom to let him race. And it's still new. It was years before most people knew what BMX was. Most people didn't know what BMX was until the movie E.T., when E.T. flies Elliot and his friends in front of the moon on their bikes. That's the moment most people in America became aware of what a BMX bike was. But like I said, this was years before that. So he was able to convince her to let him start racing. We took him to the track that first time. And as soon as we pulled in the parking lot, I knew that that's something that I wanted to do. It was shiny bikes, colorful uniforms, everything about it I knew I wanted to do. It was big trophies. So I started pestering my mom too. And eventually she let me start racing. I was still a little kid. And my very first race, I did not do well at all. I finished dead last. And it was like week after week after week, I was finishing last place, last place, last place. But it didn't really matter because I was still getting a race. It was still something I liked to do. I was still having a lot of fun. And I still wanted a trophy. So I kept at it. Eventually, those last place trophies started turning into better, or last place. I didn't get trophies for last place. But you do now, but you didn't then. So those last place finishes turned into better and better finishes, and the better and better finishes started turning into trophy finishes. The trophy finishes eventually turned into first places. So me and my brother, we were both doing really well at the time. And we started not just racing local races, but we started traveling all around the state. And we were racing at state championship level. BMX is broke down into, first it's broke down into your age and then into your skill level. So you can have everything from a 4-year-old beginner to a 65 and over expert and everything in between. So if you make you have 3 races in each event, and each race eliminates down until you get to the best 8 riders in your age group or into your class. And if you make that main event, which is what it is when you build down to those, that's everybody that makes that gets a trophy. So the very first year that I was racing for a state race, state championship, I made that main event, and I knew I was taking home a trophy, so I was really excited. And it didn't matter where I was at, just the better the finish you have, the bigger the trophy it is. I finished 4th, which was a pretty good finish for me. And I was walking over to where you get your trophy, and I go over to the table, and I give them my card, and I tell them my name, I tell them the class, and this knowing look passes between them, and I know that this is just a knowing look saying, this kid can't carry this giant trophy we're about to give him. But it wasn't. The guy leaned over, and he said, hey, sorry, kid, we're out of the 4th place trophies, but we have this ribbon for you. And I was pretty disappointed that it was a ribbon, and to top it off, it was a pink ribbon. So everybody that finished in front of me got a trophy, and everybody that finished behind me got a trophy, and I had a ribbon, a pink one. So, but eventually I did. I kept at it, and eventually I did bring home those big trophies. Well, I kept at it. A couple years later, my brother had a pretty serious accident at a race. He flipped over the bars. He had to go to the hospital, and he was hurt. And he decided he didn't want to race anymore. Since this was something that we did as a family, I was like, man, this is like my career's in jeopardy. But at that point, BMX wasn't really something that I just did. It was really part of me. If I wasn't in school, I was on my bike, I was reading a magazine or whatever. I lived BMX. So I kept at it, and I started traveling around the country with a friend. And we weren't just racing in local or state races, we were racing for national titles, national championships. And I got to race for the World Championships twice. World Championships in BMX is you're actually racing the best people in the world. It's not like you win the Super Bowl, you've only beat 31 other teams. You are actually racing the best people in the world. So by this time, by the time of the World Championships, by the time of the National Championships, years had went by and I was in high school. When you're in high school, you start developing other interests. One of those interests was girls. And I met this really beautiful girl. Smart, funny. She was into the same thing that I was into. And we fell in love. We ended up having a kid. We got married. And everything was fine. We were living life. I joined the Marine Corps. And about the time I got out of the Marine Corps, it was about 7 years into our relationship, things started falling apart a little bit. And so we decided to separate. And at first, everything was fine. We were still friends. We were still getting along. But she started making some, what I felt was bad life decisions for her, and it wasn't really just affecting her, it was affecting me, it was affecting my son. So I just kind of reacted bad to that, and that would cause her to make a worse reaction, and then it just spiraled out of control, and our relationship really fell apart. She stopped letting me see my son at that point. I had an attorney. I was trying things through the courts. I was trying things through my attorney, try to get to see my son. And she might agree to those things when you're in court, but out of court, she'd just blow it off. And there was really nothing anybody could do about it. She had moved back in with her parents, so I called over to their house, and her dad answered the phone. Her dad and I had always gotten along. We were friends. And he said, all right, well, you can come see him. Just wait till she goes to work. At that time, she must have been walking by him or something, because she starts yelling. I can hear her on the phone, and she's yelling, you're not going to let him see him. You're not going to let him see him. So, of course, that makes me mad, so I start yelling some things, and I guess if you're yelling something about somebody's daughter, they don't take it very well. So he starts yelling at me, and we start in this big argument. Now, I know that I probably shouldn't have went over there that night after he told me, I could see my son, but because now it's a volatile situation. There's a lot of energy involved, a lot of just emotion. But I wasn't making real great decisions at the time, so I went over anyway. I went in the house, and as soon as I went in, that verbal argument that we were having turned into a physical altercation. Her dad and I start fighting. During the course of this fight, a gun's pulled out, and we're both wrestling over the gun. And just a few seconds into it, just boom, gun goes off. Gun goes off 2 more times, and he kind of goes limp on me. Push him off of me. I stand up, and he's squatted on the floor. The weapon's lying right in front of him. He's bleeding. And like I said, I got a lot of emotions going on, a lot of adrenaline going on, and this is just a really scary situation. So I ran. And a little bit later, I got arrested. He survived his injuries, and I got arrested for an attempted murder. I got convicted of that. And the day I got sentenced, I can remember I was sitting in the courtroom, and I looked around, and I said, man, almost 18 years to the day that I got sentenced, the man that murdered my father sat in the same courtroom. He sat in the same table, and he sat his ass in the same chair that I was sitting in. And this guy got a really light sentence for murdering my father. He ended up doing less than 6 years for this. And that man's actions took my father out of my life forever. And I'm thinking, like, man, these actions that I took to try to see my son are the same things that's taken me out of his life. At least for his entire childhood, but who knows how long. Hopefully he'll know that I want a relationship with him. And before I get out, and maybe he'll try to contact me, but I don't know. That was almost 16 years ago. That's about the same time I developed a story for this idea, for this performance. Part of that performance was to tell him the story of what all happened. And it's been almost a year since that performance got pulled from the TED event here. So I knew I still wanted to do the event. It's still something that's important to me. And I knew the first step in that was to get these little bikes in, to start working on this performance. If I got the little bike in, I'd be able to choreograph it, and then I could start harassing people to get the big bike. And that's what I did. I started harassing people. Some people I worked on subtly, like, hey, I'd like to have these little bikes in. This would be a cool performance. Did you see the X Games last week? Whatever, anything I could do to just get it in their mind. Other people I was more direct with, and I was just harassing them to the point where they'd see me coming down the hall, and they'd turn around, they'd walk the other way because they knew that I was going to ask them about this stupid little bike. Well, a couple weeks ago, not even a couple weeks ago, it was literally a couple of days ago, I had a pretty big breakthrough in trying to give this performance because they gave me this little bike. As a matter of fact, I might make the performance twice as good because they gave me a couple of them. So I want to say this. I want to say, if you like these ideas, if you like the stories that you see at TEDx's all around the country, and specifically the TEDxMarionCorrectionals, you want to make a point to attend one of these upcoming events because I'm planning on being there at one of these too. And if you're there, you might just see the greatest performance in TED's history. Thanks, Ted.